Okay, so get this. We're diving into adverse possession, where someone can actually claim your property just by, well, using it. Sounds kind of wild, right?
It is a real thing, yeah. In legal terms, it's called, like, adverse possession. And it's definitely one of those things in law that's meant to help clear up property disputes, especially those really old ones, that go way back.
Right, and we've got some interesting cases lined up straight out of a property law textbook. I mean, one minute we're talking like a simple fence dispute, Brown v. Gobble, and the next it's all the way to Alaska with Nome 2000 v. Fagerstrom, which is just wild. But before we get into the weeds, how can someone actually say, hey, this land's mine legally when it's, well, not theirs?
Okay, so imagine this. A piece of land, maybe a small strip by a fence, someone's been using it for years, taking care of it, acting like they own it, and nobody's saying otherwise. That's where adverse possession comes in. It's not about, encouraging land theft or anything. It's more about recognizing when long-term use, especially if it's uncontested, turns into a legal claim.
Okay, so let's jump into this Brown v. Gobble case. Sounds like a classic neighbor feud, right?
Yeah, you could say that. So the Gobbles bought their property, and there was this existing fence, right? They just figured it was the boundary line. So they're using the land past it, building a treehouse, the whole 9 yards. And then, years later, the neighbors, the Browns, get a survey done. Turns out that strip of land totally belonged to them, at least according to the official records.
Hold on. So the Gobbles were just casually, building stuff on land that wasn't technically theirs?
Yeah.
That's kind of ballsy, no?
Well, it's important to remember they weren't trying to pull a fast one. They really believed it was their land, especially since the previous owners, going all the way back to the 30s, also used that land as part of their property. The Gobbles even tried using that history to their advantage with this legal thing called tacking.
Tacking? Sounds more like something you do with, sewing or something, not law. What's that all about?
So tacking, it basically lets you combine the time periods of those previous owners who also used the land like it was theirs to, bolster your claim. Like in the Gobbles case, they were saying, hey, we've been using it. The people before us used it for decades. Going back to 37, it's been treated like our property for ages.
So it's almost like this community memory argument, right? If everyone believes it's yours, maybe legally it is. That's wild.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have just been about time passing, right? Did the Gobbles actually do anything specific on that land to make it seem like theirs?
Yeah, you're right. It's, not just about letting time pass. The law actually looks at how you use the land to see if you were, really acting like an owner. So the Gobbles, they were pointing to things like their garden, that fence, even the treehouse they built, as proof they were treating it like their own.
Yeah. Yeah, it does sound like they were putting their money where their mouth is, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how does the law actually define what acting like an owner is? What's the bar there?
Okay, so there are a few things that come into play. First, there's actual possession, meaning you're using the land the way a normal owner would, like the Gobbles with their garden and all that, not just, swinging by every once in a while.
Right, right.
Then you've got open and notorious use. Basically, you're not trying to hide it. You're making it clear that you're claiming ownership. Think visible actions, not sneaky ones.
So, no sneaking over in the dead of night to plant a tomato plant.
Exactly. And then there's exclusive use. That means you're acting as the only owner. You're not sharing with, the person who actually has the deed, or just letting anyone wander on in. And lastly, there's continuous use, which shows you're consistently possessing it for a certain period of time, which, like we talked about with tacking, can actually be a team effort across different owners over the years.
Oh, yeah, that's right. In our research, we even saw an example about a guy who earned a legal right-of-way on his neighbor's driveway.
Yeah.
Just because his delivery trucks have been using it to turn around for years. It's the law really tries to catch up to how people actually use property over time,
Yeah, totally. And in the Gobbles case, the court really honed in on this open and notorious idea. It wasn't enough that the Gobbles were doing stuff on the land. It was about whether their neighbors also saw them as the rightful owners. It all comes down to community understanding, not just what one person does.
Wow. So it's almost like a popularity contest for property rights. If everyone just assumes it's yours, then legally it kind of is.
In a way, yeah. It shows how important widespread understanding is to property law. It's not just about what some old document says, but how people have been actually treating the land, even for generations. But that was just about, a little strip of land.
Things get even crazier when we head to Alaska for this Nome 2000 v. Fagerstrom case.
Yeah, off to the Alaskan wilderness. This is more than just, a fence being off by a few feet, right? So tell me, what were the Fagerstroms doing on this, like, vast, wild piece of land?
So the Fagerstroms were using this piece of land owned by Gnome 2000 for, well, things people do in rural Alaska. Fishing, camping, berry picking. They even built a cabin on it, a fish rack, even had reindeer on it at some point.
Reindeer, okay, that's amazing. Right. But their use of the land was, admittedly, kind of on and off. But that makes sense, it's Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to test my luck with those winters for too long either. But did the court see that as, real ownership kind of behavior, being so sporadic?
See, that's where it gets really interesting. It wasn't just about what they did. It was if it could even be considered, quote, hostile or adverse in that setting. Rural Alaska is a very specific context. Could their, traditional lifestyle be seen as a claim of ownership, even if it doesn't match, a typical suburban backyard situation?
Right. Okay, so when we say hostile, we don't mean like the Fagerstroms setting bear traps for surveyors or something like that.
Uh-huh. No, not quite. It's more of a legal term than, describing their attitude. And here's the kicker. Different states see hostility differently. Some states look at what the person was thinking, did they know the land wasn't theirs but still act like it was on purpose? Others, they only care about what you did. Would a reasonable person see those actions as claiming ownership regardless of what you're thinking in your head?
So it's the difference between trying to pull something over on someone versus just living your life in a way that makes sense for you and the place you're in. Okay, so how'd the court decide in the Fagerstrom case? Did they think their, let's say, nomadic lifestyle counted?
Well, the Alaskan court, they went with focusing on the actions themselves. So it didn't matter if the Fagerstroms thought in their heads, this is my land. What mattered was they built stuff, they excluded others sometimes, basically acted in a way that said ownership, even if it was rooted in a different idea of what that means.
It's like the law trying to catch up with different cultures and ways of life. What's crystal clear in the suburbs might be totally different in Alaska.
You got it. In this case, it even brought up all these fascinating points about, traditional Native Alaskan land use, where taking care of the land and sharing resources is more important than just saying, this is mine, period.
Which, thinking about the Fagerstroms, they weren't trying to steal land, like you might imagine. It was more like they saw themselves as caretakers.
Right.
They even had their expert witness who said their actions showed they were, stewards of the land, showing respect for nature, Makes you think how those ancient traditions fit into this modern property law system. I mean, it's not like everyone needs to run out and measure their property lines right this second.
Yeah.
These cases are super interesting, but it's not like adverse possession is just happening left and right.
Right. The law isn't trying to make it easy to claim your neighbor's land or anything. It's
Right.
more about clearing things up, what happened in the past and what some document says don't match up. But, it never hurts to be in the know, just in case.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So knowledge is power, as they say.
Yeah.
What can our listeners do to, protect themselves, if anything?
Okay, so number one, know your property lines. And I mean, really know them. If there's even a little doubt, get a surveyor out there.
Yeah.
It'll be worth it, especially if you're thinking about building something or if you're, already a little iffy about where the lines are.
Hey, a friendly chat with the neighbors goes a long way, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Just talking to each other can stop these situations before they even start.
Right.
If you see something a little off, say something early on. Sometimes just a quick chat clears up the whole thing. You can work it out together.
Yeah. Definitely don't be shy about speaking up.
Yeah.
If you see something weird going on with the property line, maybe bring some cookies over when you do it, keep things neighborly. But what if talking it out doesn't work? What then?
Well, if you've tried being nice and it's still a no-go, that's when you might want to call in a lawyer.
Okay.
And it's also super important to know your local laws about this stuff.
Right.
Because every state has their own rules, their own timelines, and what works in one place might not fly somewhere else.
Right. It's like that saying, good fences make good neighbors, but the legal version.
Uh-huh, exactly.
Knowing your rights, knowing where your property begins and ends, and, just staying informed is key.
Couldn't have said it better myself. At the end of the day, this whole property law thing, it's about more than just lines on a map, right? It's about how we treat each other, how we act on this earth, the spaces we share. And sometimes it's about realizing that how we act over time, well, that shapes what it even means to own something.
That's a really good point. Well, this has been a fascinating look at adverse possession, to say the least. A huge thank you to our expert for walking us through this. I think a lot of people get this area of law wrong.
The pleasure was all mine, really. I enjoyed it.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those property lines clear, those neighborly relations strong, and as always, keep those legal minds sharp. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.